Hello, I'm Ollie, and this is Criminally, where I talk about crime, pulp, horror, that kind of thing. Today, none of the above. Today, pirates. I'm going to do the pirates tag. So this tag was created by Hannah at Hannah's blog, and I saw it done by Anne, Anne with a book. So Anne does really interesting reviews and commentary on kind of historical fiction, historical non-fiction, and classics. So different kind of stuff to the stuff I read and talk about. But I do enjoy her channel a lot. I saw her do this tag, and it's a really fun tag, and it's got some really interesting facts about pirates in it. The questions, there's only 8 questions. Some of the questions are quite long, but they're quite interesting too. So I enjoyed her video. So we'll see how I get on with it. So the first question is, Captain Kidd was the first pirate to be very publicly hunted down and captured. Once he was captured, betrayed by his friend, there were rumours that he had a ship full of treasure, and this kick-started the myth that pirates have buried treasure. Incidentally, if he did have a ship full of goods hidden away, it was never found. So name a book or collection of books that you prized very highly and would bury as treasure over risking them being stolen. So my answer to that is this book, Ghastly Beyond Belief by Neil Gaiman and Kim Newman, which came out in the 80s. Very carefully open it. Yeah, so published in 1985. And I've had a copy of it pretty much since then, I think. So this is my copy that I bought as a 12-year-old, I guess, if it came out in 85. And I love it. So it's a collection of science fiction and horror quotes from both books and movies, and it's just very, very funny. So they give very amusing commentary on the quotes that they pick, and it's a wonderful selection of quotations and endlessly entertaining and amusing. And I treasure this copy of it because it's long out of print. I did mention it on Twitter a while ago and tagged Neil Gaiman, and he very graciously replied to my tweet and confirmed that it was the second book he had published. So the first book he had published, amusingly, was like a biography of the band Duran Duran, which I think is brilliant. And yeah, this was the second thing he had published. It's brilliant. Okay, next question. The general public were fascinated with the criminal lives of pirates and eagerly bought and read pamphlets describing their crimes. Name a true crime book or a book that contains a fascinating bad character. So I'm going to go here with a classic of true crime, which I read for the first time last year, Helter Skelter by Vincent Bugliosi, I think I'm pronouncing his surname correctly, which obviously is about Charles Manson and the Manson family. So Bugliosi was the prosecutor in the Manson trial, and it's a big old book, but it's absolutely fascinating and very engagingly written as well. So if you're interested in Manson, and I do think he's a fascinating character, and you know, the crimes of the Manson family and their place in I suppose the culture of you know, America in the 60s and 70s, I think is really interesting. So yeah, a very good book. Okay, next question. It probably comes as no surprise that the British took advantage of every opportunity to gain power in the Caribbean and the Americas. In peacetime, they condemned pirates, declaring them evil and against all of mankind. They made death the penalty for piracy, but in wartime they employed and encouraged people to become pirates and capture enemy ships. They just called them privateers instead of pirates. So certainly, you know, we have seen in recent days and weeks the ability of the British government and the British Prime Minister to be to twist the truth to their own ends and to lie like bastards, basically. And I'm going to put this video up on the 20th. Today it's the 15th, so who knows whether Boris Johnson is still Prime Minister when this video goes up. I certainly hope that he is not, because he's a wanker. So the question anyway is, name a book with an authority or government that takes advantage of their power. So I'm going to use this prompt to talk about a book which isn't a fiction. I think they're getting at fiction books here, but I'm gonna pick something completely different. So I'm going to pick my favourite politics book, which is The Dictator's Handbook by Bruce Bueno de Mesquita and Alastair Smith. It's a really brilliant book, which is about how military coups and things like that happen. So how violent takeovers of power happen, and how dictators come to power, and then how dictators have to, what they have to do in order to hang on to power. And what they do brilliantly in the second half of the book is expand that to talk about how democratically elected leaders come to power, and how that, the different groups they have to influence in order to come to power. And what they then have to do to remain in power, how they have to keep pleasing the right people to keep their grip on power. So it's a really fascinating book, and every time something happens in politics, including the kind of stuff that's been happening in the UK over the last days and weeks, as I've said, I reflect on that book. It's really good and definitely worth reading. Okay, question 4. There were sometimes strong reactions from the general public against the execution of pirates. There is a recorded time that once in Jamaica, the crowd actually stormed the execution dock to save a pirate from his death sentence. Governor Lord Hamilton offered a reward and pardon for anyone with information about where he had gone, but still nobody betrayed the pirate. So the question is, name a character from a book that you would fiercely protect. So my answer to this is Jade Daniels, who's the protagonist in My Heart is a Chainsaw by Stephen Graham Jones, which was a book I really loved, and I really loved Jade as a central character. She's so fierce and determined, but so vulnerable at the same time. So if you've not read the book, she's a teenage girl of Indigenous American descent in small town America. In a town, and she's obsessed with slasher films, and she's convinced, so there's been a slasher type crime in the past in the town she lives in, and she's convinced that something terrible is going to happen again. And in typical horror novel or movie fashion, she's a teenager, so no one pays any attention to her, and she's got a very troubled background, and her love of slasher films and horror films is one of the things that kind of grounds her and enables her to keep going. I really fell in love with her as a character. I thought she was an absolutely fantastic character, and it's rare that I've cared as much about a character as I cared about her in the book. I was really completely invested in what happened to her. Okay, question 5. During the time of the golden age of pirates, women were not allowed to join the navy, and it was very rare for a woman to openly join a pirate crew. To claim their positions on ships, some women were forced to disguise themselves as men. Name a character that has to go into disguise to achieve something. So probably partly because I've recently been reading the last few of a series of Unfortunate Events books by Lemony Snicket, aka Daniel Handler. I'm going to go with Count Olaf from those books, who is just such a fantastically evil but funny character. If you're not familiar with the series, so it's about this trio of orphans who've inherited money, and Count Olaf is trying to basically swindle them out of their money. And he does this in the first, I think, 8 or 9 books by disguising himself as a different person every time. And it's always obvious to both the reader and the children that it is Count Olaf, but the adults are always completely oblivious to it and never, no matter how ridiculous his disguise is, never believe that it's Count Olaf until right at the end. And they're wonderfully amusing books, and Olaf's a brilliant character. Question 6. Many of us love the idea of pirates, but the reality is that pirates were extremely vicious, in some cases forcing the captains of ships to eat their own body parts. Isn't that a fantastic fact? I'm minded to think of Stephen King's short story Survivor Type, where the doctor gets shipwrecked on an island and has to eat himself. I don't know whether this fact was an inspiration for Survivor Type or not, but I think it's a really horrific and brilliant fact. However, other pirates may have had better intentions, merely looking for a better life for themselves once their privateering careers had ended. Some pirates were even referred to as the Robin Hoods of the sea. Name a book featuring body horror, or name a book with a morally grey character. Now, of course, I'm going to name here Twisted Anatomy, which is a body horror anthology of short stories I've done a video on it, and I will link to it. Disclaimer, I'm one of the editors of the book, but I think it's a really, really good short story collection. All the stories are body horror, but there's a real variety of different stories in there. It's got, you know, a number of writers who you may well have heard of. So Hailey Piper's got a story in there, as has Laurel Hightower, and loads of other writers as well. It's a really, I would say this because I was involved in the production of it, but I think it's a really good body horror anthology. So I will leave a link to it in the description for the video on Amazon. Go buy a copy. It's all for charity, all for a great cause. So it's for the Pulmonary Hypertension Association and the National Domestic Violence Helpline. So all the proceeds go to charity. It's not very expensive. Get it on your Kindle now. Okay, book 7. Pirates have been heavily featured in popular culture, featuring in books, movies, music, etc., etc. What is one of your favourite things featuring pirates? So I want to talk here about a couple of books that I read a few years ago. So they came out, I think, in the early 2010s by a crime writer who I really like called Anthony Neil Smith. And he's written this couple of books about two characters called Mustafa and Adam, who are like Somali pirates, basically. So it's about their experience as young men in Somalia, and about what happens to them when they manage to move to America. So yeah, really gripping, a couple of really gripping novels, which is maybe not the sort of pirates that Hannah was getting at when she wrote this question, but still, you know, the kind of modern pirates, and they're really, really good books, very, very engaging, and, you know, quite moving, but, you know, great crime novels as well. Final question then, question 8. Pirates travelled about all the time. What countries would you like to visit most if you were a pirate? I have always really, really wanted to go to Japan. So since I was a teenager, I've been really interested in Japanese culture. And yeah, I love Japanese movies and, you know, manga and stuff like that. You know, as a teenager particularly, I really like that stuff. Less so more recently, but I still think Japanese culture is really interesting. And, you know, again, less so nowadays, but I used to be really into video games as well, particularly Nintendo video games. So Japan has always been somewhere I'd like to visit. And, you know, given that I was going to that part of the world anyway, I'd also really like to visit Australia and New Zealand. So, you know, I've always, you know, New Zealand just looks fantastic. You know, geographically, just looks like an amazing country. So I'd love to go to New Zealand, and, you know, Australia looks like quite a nice place as well. So given I'm that way, I'll pop into Australia too. So yeah, that's the answer to the final question. So I'm going to tag some people in this one because I'm going to put this video up this week. So I am going to tag Michael K. Vaughan, because I'd like to see his thoughts on this. I know he's read a few pirate books in his time, and I'm also going to tag Not Just Book Reviews, who was kind enough to tag me in the Astounding Science Fiction tag recently, which I'm going to do as well. So yeah, I'm going to tag those two channels, and if you don't know those channels, do check them out. They're both excellent. So yeah, that's the tag. As always, thank you very much for watching. Hope you're safe and well. Hope you're reading lots of great stuff. Let me know your thoughts on pirates in the comments. If you've got any particular favourite pirate books or movies, then do shout. But yeah, as always, thank you very much for watching, and I'll speak to you again soon. Cheerio.